Now, if you're old, you know who Joe Montana is. If you're young, you might not know because he last played a long, long time ago in the early 90s. But he dominated the NFL in the 80s. And if you're a connoisseur of football, chances are you know a thing or two about Joe Montana. So he's in the news. Now, if you didn't hear this and you might have missed it, the former 49ers headliner, Joe Montana, randomly said that Dolphins quarterback Dan Marino is the best of all time. Say what? Yeah. Now, he did this to Men's Health. We're not sure why Joe Montana was talking to Men's Health, but he did. Montana declared, quote, "You put Marino into today's game where he gets a free release and his receivers, holy cow, weren't very big," Montana said, talking about Dan Marino with the Dolphins. So let us discuss the question, how do you dissect Joe Montana randomly naming in August, late August, that Dan Marino is the best of all time? So I've got Mood Ring, Stratomatic, and Pufferfish. And we'll combine all of these things together, and we are going to make an all-you-can-eat buffet with quality food. Very rarely do you get that, but that is what we're going to make. I know. Amazing. All right, so to kick off here, Joe Montana, here's my take on this. Joe Montana is chapped. This is a passive-aggressive act by Montana, a little rebellion against the NFL machine. And really, it's that Joe Cool, it's perfectly understandable. It's natural. He is bothered that he has been passed by Tommy. And as they say in the Army, Joe Montana suffered a reduction in rank and social status. And so by tossing out Dan Marino's name, he softens the blow, right? He softens the blow. Dan Marino is a contemporary from Joe Montana's generation. They played against each other many times. Well, not that many. One was in the AFC, one was in the NFC. But they had some matchups. And Montana did mention, he said there's a delineation between greatest of all time and best of all time. So now we're getting into semantics. For most, they mean the same thing. For most commoners, if you say something is the greatest or something is the best, people interpret that the same way. That's why we like to point out that the legal definition of the term best means as good as all the rest. So when people say greatest, people hear best and greatest are interchangeable. They're synonyms of one another. Now, keep in mind that Montana has been on the record in the past as saying that Tom Brady is definitely the best player in NFL history. So the lesson here, when you listen to Joe Montana talk, check the temperature of his finger. Montana is known to go up and down and all around. His opinion depends on the color of his mood ring. So the temperature of his finger determines the mood ring color. Now, furthermore, in New England, the transaction wire burning up for the Patriots, we learned that the New England football team is bringing back a pair of players that they shut down and fired. They excommunicated Bailey Zappe and Malik Cunningham, their quarterbacks, but both of them are going to return. Now, technically to the practice squad, just one day after being fired by the Patriots, and both of these guys cleared waivers, and they're going to go back to Foxborough. Briefly, the Patriots only had Mac Jones as their quarterback. So the question is, why did the Pats waive Bailey Zappe and then immediately bring him back? And the answer to this is Stratomatic. That Bill Belichick using roster manipulation like a ninja. He's a samurai. And from what we've heard here, there was a bit of a fallout. Bill O'Brien was not a smitten kitten with Bailey Zappe, and so they figured nobody else is going to take this guy, so he'll pass through. We can get him back. And Cunningham and Zappe did not play well in the practice games. Like that matters that much in these practice games. And Cunningham showed a couple of flashes. But both those guys, if you are Bailey Zappe or to a lesser degree Malik Cunningham of the Pats, you were kneed in the balls and poked in the eye. Because not only did the Patriots get rid of you, all 31 other teams said, we don't want this guy. We're good. These guys have cooties. Humbling. All right, parting shot. Let's go to Cincinnati, home of the Bengals. Joe Burrow back at practice, but that's not what we're talking about. Chad Johnson, the adorable Chad Johnson, the debonair Chad Johnson is back as he will be joining the Bengals Ring of Honor. And oh, what a Ring of Honor it is with Boomer Esiason. Now, Chad Johnson announced that he is obviously the greatest entertainer to ever grace the football field as long as they've been playing football and as far as Chad Johnson is concerned. That's a quote. He said, greatest entertainer to ever grace the football field, in his opinion. So it got us thinking. It got us thinking here. The question, where does Chad Johnson rank among the greatest entertainers to play in the NFL? So Ocho Cinco, and I don't do lists, and I'm not going to do a list now, but Ocho Cinco is in the top 5 for me in my lifetime. And that's really the only list that matters. Now, maybe you're older than me, maybe you're younger than me, and you're going to have a different list. But the response by Ocho Cinco, on brand. Chad Johnson is the human pufferfish of attention whores. It's just wonderful the way he operates. He was great everywhere except the Patriots when he went there, and it was a disaster. But we would expect nothing less. And much like the greatest player debate, we chip away at that. In fact, we started this hour talking about Joe Montana claiming that Dan Marino here is the best quarterback in NFL history. And these debates, when you chip away at these debates, it often goes by generation. Now, Chad Johnson was the king of kings in his salad days. He was never upstaged by anyone. All right, so you start with that. And as a chronicler of choreography in the NFL, Cincinnati is the gold standard for the celebration. And among the players that passed through Cincinnati that did not make the cut, the Ickey Shuffle. Ickey Woods, look him up. Running back in the day, long time ago. Had the Ickey Shuffle after he scored a touchdown. T.O. was teammates with Chad Johnson with the Bengals, and didn't quite work out so well for T.O., but they were there together. And then you look at, not a list, because I don't do list radio, but Big Ben's big board. If you look at Big Ben's big board, the top 5 entertainers that we had in the NFL, and this is in my lifetime. It's in my lifetime, the people I remember. So, not a list, but at number 5, Kelly Washington of the Bengals. You remember, if you're old enough to remember, Kelly Washington was the center of attraction. He did the squirrel dance, and it was wonderful. It was glorious. The squirrel dance by Kelly Washington. So that's, you got a bunch of Bengals here. Now, Chad Johnson is number 4 on my big board, and he did a lot of dances. He said his favorite was when he had a hostile takeover of a CBS television camera and panned to show his family. He said that was my favorite. He talked about how he spent a lot of time planning these things. But for me, I'm a purist when it comes to the celebration after a touchdown. All I need, river dance. That's it. I'm good. I love the river dance. I loved it. I don't need the other stuff. River dance. I'm in. And then next up on the big board, I'm going to go to a guy who played for multiple teams, but this was a Kansas City Chief. Johnny Morton out of USC. Johnny Morton, who did the worm. He did the worm in the end zone. Wonderful. A holy terror. Johnny Morton doing the worm after scoring a touchdown. Now, number 2 on my big board, we will mix and mingle with a man who is now working for the NFL, the league office. Last I checked, I think he still has this job unless they got rid of him recently. Merton Hanks, the chicken dance, the bobbing his head like a chicken. Does it get more entertaining than a grown-ass football player making a big play and dancing like a chicken? Bark, 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 chicken. Yeah. And one slot left. Very controversial on Big Ben's big board. Holy F. The number one entertainer in my lifetime. I always smile when I think about this person celebrating a touchdown. William Perry, better known as Refrigerator Perry for the Chicago Bears, the Super Bowl Shuffle back in the day. Do you know that Refrigerator Perry, his nickname when he played for the Bears a million years ago was Biscuit, because he was one biscuit shy of 350 pounds, so they called him Biscuit. But I love that. Fat guy dancing. Who doesn't like a fat man dancing? Serious. Right? I mean, it's entertaining, the whole thing. And I love to this day, that was probably almost 40 years ago now, but people still gripe that William Perry scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl and Walter Payton never did. And people are furious still. All these years later, like historians of the NFL get so